For 12 years, I supported a woman who insisted I owed her everything. When she demanded $35,000 for raising me and threatened legal action unless I paid immediately, I finally agreed to see her in court. What the judge said next made her face turn white, and she never spoke to me again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Alexandra Hayes, and until 8 months ago, I believed that love meant sacrifice without recognition, support without gratitude, and loyalty without reciprocation. I had spent the better part of my adult life convinced that family obligation required me to prioritize everyone else's needs, while my own dreams remained perpetually deferred to some undefined future date. The story I am about to share began in the modest suburbs of Portland, Oregon, where I lived in a split-level house that had never quite felt like home despite the 12 years I had contributed to its mortgage payments. The beige walls and brown carpet throughout the main living areas reflected the personality of my stepmother, Patricia Hoffman Hayes, who had transformed our family residence into a monument to her particular vision of domestic respectability. Patricia had entered my life when I was 16 years old, arriving with designer luggage and expensive opinions about everything from proper table settings to appropriate career aspirations for young women. She married my father, Robert Hayes, in a ceremony that cost more than most families spend on automobiles, funded entirely through contributions from relatives who wanted to ensure that Robert's second chance at happiness would launch successfully. My father had been widowed when I was 14, after my mother succumbed to complications from cancer treatments that had drained our family's financial resources and emotional reserves over the course of 18 grueling months. Robert Hayes was a decent man who worked steadily as a project manager for a regional construction company, but the medical expenses and funeral costs had left him struggling to maintain stability for both himself and me during the most challenging period of our lives. Patricia presented herself as the solution to our difficulties. She possessed a steady income from her position as an office administrator at a dental practice, maintained an immaculate appearance that suggested competence and reliability, and expressed enthusiasm about creating a stable home environment where Robert could focus on his career while I completed my high school education and prepared for college. The early months of their relationship had proceeded smoothly, with Patricia demonstrating patience and understanding as Robert and I adjusted to the presence of another person in our previously quiet household. She contributed to grocery expenses, helped with household maintenance tasks, and showed interest in my academic progress and extracurricular activities. Her involvement felt supportive rather than intrusive, and I appreciated having another adult available to provide guidance and assistance during my final years of high school. The transformation in Patricia's behavior began approximately 6 months after she and Robert exchanged wedding vows in a ceremony that I had been honored to attend as maid of honor. The supportive partner and caring stepmother gradually evolved into someone who viewed our household as a business operation that required careful management and strategic investment in order to generate appropriate returns. Patricia began implementing new systems for household expense management, creating detailed budgets that allocated costs for utilities, maintenance, groceries, and personal expenses among the various family members according to formulas she had developed based on income levels, usage patterns, and what she described as fair contribution principles. These systems initially appeared reasonable and responsible, reflecting Patricia's professional experience with administrative processes and financial organization. However, the complexity and scope of Patricia's financial management systems expanded continuously, eventually encompassing charges for services and benefits that I had never considered as separate cost centers requiring individual payment arrangements. Patricia maintained detailed records documenting the expenses associated with my presence in the household, including allocated portions of utility costs, food expenses, transportation services, and what she categorized as educational support and emotional guidance services. During my senior year of high school, Patricia presented me with monthly statements itemizing my accumulated household obligations and projected future costs associated with my continued residence and family membership. These statements included charges for laundry services, meal preparation, housekeeping activities performed in shared spaces, and administrative time spent managing various aspects of family life that affected my circumstances. The financial tracking system that Patricia implemented created an environment where every interaction and service became a potential billable event, subject to documentation and eventual payment expectation. When she provided transportation to school events or medical appointments, the mileage and time were recorded for future reimbursement. When she prepared meals that I consumed or purchased groceries for items I requested, the costs were carefully documented and allocated to my account. Patricia explained that these systems would help me develop fiscal responsibility and realistic understanding of adult living expenses, while ensuring that my presence in the household did not create unfair financial burden for her and Robert. She emphasized that learning to track and manage personal expenses represented essential preparation for independent living and career success. My father's response to Patricia's financial management approach reflected his appreciation for her organizational skills and his desire to maintain harmony in their marriage, while ensuring that I received appropriate preparation for adult responsibilities. Robert had struggled with household financial management since my mother's death, and Patricia's systematic approach provided structure and predictability that reduced his stress and simplified his daily decision-making requirements. Robert encouraged me to cooperate with Patricia's systems and to view the experience as valuable training for independent living, rather than as unreasonable burden or punishment. He explained that many young adults failed to develop appropriate financial management skills because their families shielded them from real-world cost considerations and responsibility expectations. The cumulative effect of Patricia's financial tracking systems was the creation of an environment where my presence in my own family home felt conditional upon my ability to generate sufficient income to offset the costs associated with basic living requirements and family participation. Every meal consumed, every utility service used, and every interaction with Patricia or Robert became subject to potential financial obligation that accumulated in ledgers that Patricia maintained with meticulous attention to detail. As I prepared for college during my final semester of high school, Patricia presented me with comprehensive projections of the continued costs associated with maintaining my family membership while pursuing higher education. These projections included allowances for periodic visits home during academic breaks, ongoing communication services, and what she described as family support services that would be available to me throughout my college years. The complexity and scope of these financial obligations created pressure for me to identify educational programs and career paths that would generate sufficient income to meet both my independent living requirements and my ongoing family financial obligations. Patricia emphasized that my educational investment should prioritize practical career preparation over personal interests or intellectual curiosity that might not translate effectively to employment opportunities and salary potential. I enrolled at Portland State University to study business administration, a program selection that reflected Patricia's guidance regarding career paths with reliable employment prospects and advancement potential, rather than my personal interests in creative fields or social sciences. The choice represented a compromise between practical necessity and personal preference that characterized most of my decision-making during this period. The transition to college life provided some relief from the intensity of Patricia's household financial management systems, but her tracking and documentation activities continued through regular communication and periodic visits home. Patricia maintained detailed records of all support services she provided during my college years, including emergency financial assistance, transportation services, meal provision during visits, and emotional support during challenging academic periods. Upon graduation with my bachelor's degree in business administration, I secured employment as an administrative coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Portland. The position provided steady income with health benefits and advancement potential, meeting the criteria that Patricia had established for acceptable career choices, while offering some satisfaction through interesting project work and professional development opportunities. My return to full-time residence in the family home after college graduation marked the beginning of a new phase in Patricia's financial management systems. She presented me with comprehensive documentation of all accumulated expenses associated with my family membership from age 16 through college completion, totaling approximately $28,000 in charges for housing, utilities, food, transportation, educational support, and various services rendered during the previous 7 years. Patricia explained that this documentation represented a formal accounting of the investment she and Robert had made in my development in preparation for independent adult life. She emphasized that while she did not expect immediate repayment of this full amount, she anticipated that I would begin making regular monthly payments toward this obligation while also contributing appropriately to ongoing household expenses associated with my continued residence. The presentation of this accumulated financial obligation created a profound shift in my understanding of my relationship with Patricia and my place within our family structure. The realization that every aspect of my presence and participation in family life had been subject to detailed financial tracking and obligation accumulation fundamentally altered my perception of the support and guidance I had received during my formative years. Patricia's systematic documentation of services rendered and expenses incurred created a business-like framework for our family relationships that reduced interactions to transactional exchanges subject to cost-benefit analysis and payment expectations. The warmth and spontaneity that characterizes healthy family relationships had been replaced by calculated evaluations of value received and compensation owed. The monthly payment arrangements that Patricia proposed would have consumed approximately 40% of my entry-level salary, leaving insufficient resources for independent housing, transportation, or personal expenses that would enable me to establish autonomous adult life. The financial structure that Patricia had created effectively ensured my continued dependence on the household, while simultaneously characterizing that dependence as a debt obligation requiring ongoing repayment. The psychological impact of discovering that my family relationships had been operating under these financial terms created confusion and emotional distress that affected my work performance, social relationships, and personal well-being. The realization that every gesture of support or expression of care had been carefully documented as a billable service challenged my understanding of family love and unconditional acceptance. As I struggled to process the implications of Patricia's financial documentation and payment expectations, I began to recognize patterns of manipulation and control that had been developing gradually over the previous 7 years. The systematic tracking of expenses and creation of financial obligations represented methods for ensuring my compliance with Patricia's expectations and preventing my transition to independent adult life that might reduce her influence and control over my choices and circumstances. The house where I had hoped to find stability and support after my mother's death had become an environment where my presence was tolerated only in exchange for financial compensation and ongoing obligation that would extend indefinitely into my adult life. Patricia's vision of family relationships prioritized economic utility and control over emotional connection and unconditional support. The stage had been set for a confrontation that would force me to choose between continued compliance with Patricia's financial demands and the pursuit of genuine independence and authentic family relationships based on love, rather than economic exchange. The documentation that Patricia had so carefully maintained would ultimately provide the evidence needed to expose the exploitative nature of her approach and demonstrate the fundamental misunderstanding of family obligation that had guided her treatment of me throughout my adolescent and young adult years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The transformation that would follow this realization would require courage to challenge established family dynamics, wisdom to recognize the difference between genuine care and manipulative control, and strength to pursue authentic relationships even when doing so meant confronting difficult truths about the people I had trusted most. The woman who had promised to provide stability and support had instead created a system of financial exploitation that would ultimately reveal her true priorities and the conditional nature of her declared affection. This was the environment and relationship dynamic that would soon explode into a legal confrontation that would fundamentally reshape my understanding of family, obligation, and the courage required to demand respect and authentic love from the people who claimed to care about our well-being. Alexandra Hayes had not always been the quiet, compliant young woman who accepted financial exploitation as a normal component of family relationships. Her transformation into someone who prioritized others' expectations over her own aspirations represented a fundamental departure from the confident, creative child she had been during the years when her mother, Catherine Hayes, provided the emotional foundation for their small family unit. Catherine Hayes had possessed an artistic soul that found expression through watercolor paintings, handmade pottery, and elaborate gardens that transformed their modest backyard into a sanctuary of color and natural beauty. She worked part-time as a substitute teacher in the local elementary schools, a position that provided flexible scheduling and summers off to spend with Alexandra, while contributing modest but steady income to their household finances. The Hayes family home during Alexandra's early childhood had been characterized by spontaneous creativity, intellectual curiosity, and the kind of unconditional love that enables children to develop confidence in their own worth and capabilities. Catherine encouraged Alexandra to pursue her interests in creative writing, amateur photography, and community theater, without concern for whether these activities would translate into profitable career opportunities or practical adult skills. Weekend mornings often began with Catherine and Alexandra collaborating on art projects that covered their kitchen table with paints, brushes, and paper, while Robert prepared breakfast and offered commentary on their creative progress. These sessions taught Alexandra that self-expression was valuable for its own sake, rather than for its potential to generate external recognition or financial compensation. Catherine's approach to parenting emphasized emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and personal authenticity over conventional markers of achievement or social conformity. She encouraged Alexandra to question authority when appropriate, defend her convictions when challenged, and prioritize personal integrity over social approval in situations where these values conflicted with external expectations. The bedtime stories that Catherine shared with Alexandra often featured strong female protagonists who overcame adversity through courage, intelligence, and determination, rather than through compliance or dependence on others for rescue. These narratives planted seeds of understanding about personal agency and self-advocacy that would remain dormant during Alexandra's adolescent years, but would eventually resurface when circumstances demanded courage and independent action. Alexandra's academic performance during elementary and middle school reflected the confidence and intellectual curiosity that characterized her home environment. She excelled in creative writing assignments, participated actively in classroom discussions, and demonstrated leadership qualities in group projects and extracurricular activities. Her teachers consistently noted her ability to think independently and articulate her perspectives with clarity and conviction. The creative writing competitions that Alexandra entered during middle school provided early validation of her literary abilities and artistic vision. Her short stories often explored themes of personal transformation, social justice, and the courage required to challenge unfair treatment or discriminatory practices. These early works revealed an intuitive understanding of narrative structure and character development that suggested significant potential for future artistic achievement. Alexandra's involvement in community theater during her middle school years introduced her to collaborative creative processes and performance skills that enhanced her confidence and public speaking abilities. She particularly enjoyed roles that required her to portray strong, independent characters who faced difficult circumstances with grace and determination. These experiences reinforced her natural inclinations towards self-reliance and principled decision-making. The family's financial situation during Alexandra's early years was modest but stable, with Robert's construction management income providing adequate resources for basic needs and occasional luxuries, while Catherine's substitute teaching contributed to their savings and provided flexibility for family vacations and educational opportunities. The household operated on principles of frugality and careful budgeting, but financial considerations never dominated family discussions or influenced major decisions about Alexandra's education or activities. Catherine's diagnosis with breast cancer during Alexandra's 8th grade year marked the beginning of a gradual transformation in family dynamics that would ultimately reshape Alexandra's understanding of her own role and responsibilities within family relationships. The initial prognosis was optimistic, with treatment protocols that promised high success rates and minimal long-term impact on Catherine's health and quality of life. However, the cancer treatment process proved more challenging and expensive than the family had anticipated. Catherine's response to chemotherapy was complicated by severe side effects that required additional medications, extended recovery periods, and modifications to her treatment plan that increased both the duration and cost of her medical care. Her substitute teaching income was eliminated during the periods when she was too weak or nauseous to work, creating financial pressure that required careful management of household expenses and medical bills. Alexandra's response to her mother's illness reflected the emotional maturity and sense of responsibility that Catherine had cultivated through years of encouraging independent thinking and consideration for others. Alexandra voluntarily assumed additional household responsibilities, including meal preparation, laundry management, and cleaning tasks that Catherine could no longer perform consistently during her treatment periods. The transition from creative, carefree childhood to premature adult responsibilities occurred gradually enough that Alexandra did not initially recognize the extent to which her own needs and interests were being subordinated to family crisis management. Her involvement in community theater was discontinued to provide more time for household tasks. Her creative writing projects were abandoned, as her energy focused on practical concerns and family support activities. Robert's emotional response to Catherine's illness included increased reliance on Alexandra for household management and emotional support that exceeded appropriate expectations for a 14-year-old child. His requests for help with meal planning, medical appointment coordination, and Catherine's care needs placed Alexandra in caregiving roles that interfered with her academic performance and social development. The family's social relationships became increasingly isolated as Catherine's illness progressed, and their focus narrowed to medical treatment and day-to-day survival. Friends and extended family members provided initial support through meal delivery and household assistance, but the prolonged nature of Catherine's illness eventually exhausted their social support network and left the immediate family members to manage alone. Alexandra's academic performance began declining during her mother's second year of cancer treatment, as the demands of household responsibilities and emotional stress interfered with her ability to concentrate on schoolwork and participate in classroom activities. Her teachers expressed concern about the changes in her behavior and academic engagement, but the family was too overwhelmed with medical crises to address these educational concerns effectively. The financial stress associated with Catherine's medical expenses created an environment where every family decision required careful consideration of cost implications and potential impact on their ability to continue affording treatment. Discussions about Alexandra's educational goals and extracurricular interests were postponed indefinitely, as all available resources were directed toward medical expenses and basic survival needs. Catherine's death during Alexandra's sophomore year of high school marked the end of the family's financial crisis but created new challenges related to grief processing, household reorganization, and Robert's struggle to provide appropriate emotional support while managing his own bereavement. The funeral expenses and final medical bills created additional financial pressure that prolonged the family's economic instability. The months following Catherine's death were characterized by profound sadness, social isolation, and practical challenges that neither Robert nor Alexandra felt prepared to address effectively. The household routines that had provided structure during Catherine's illness were no longer necessary, but developing new routines and family dynamics proved difficult without Catherine's guidance and organizational abilities. Alexandra's emotional response to her mother's death included guilt about feeling relief that the prolonged medical crisis had ended, confusion about her own identity and future goals without Catherine's guidance, and anxiety about her ability to maintain the mature, responsible behavior that had become her primary identity during the previous 2 years of family crisis. Robert's grief manifested through periods of withdrawal and depression that limited his availability for parenting responsibilities and emotional support during Alexandra's final years of high school. His reliance on Alexandra for household management and emotional stability continued and intensified, creating an environment where Alexandra's role as caregiver and family stabilizer became permanently established. The introduction of Patricia into their lives approximately 18 months after Catherine's death initially seemed like the solution to their practical and emotional needs. Patricia's organized, efficient approach to household management provided structure and predictability that had been missing since Catherine's illness began. Her financial stability and professional competence offered the promise of reduced stress and improved circumstances for both Robert and Alexandra. Alexandra's initial response to Patricia was cautiously positive, as she appreciated having another adult available to share household responsibilities and provide guidance about college preparation and career planning. Patricia's interest in Alexandra's academic progress and future goals seemed to reflect genuine care and investment in her success and well-being. The gradual transformation in Patricia's behavior from supportive partner to controlling manager occurred slowly enough that Alexandra did not initially recognize the fundamental differences between Patricia's conditional support and Catherine's unconditional love. The financial tracking systems and obligation expectations that Patricia implemented seemed reasonable when presented as life skills training and preparation for independent living. Alexandra's compliance with Patricia's increasingly demanding expectations reflected both her desire to maintain family harmony and her internalized understanding that her role within the family structure was to provide support and service, rather than to receive unconditional care and acceptance. The patterns of premature adult responsibility and family caretaking that had developed during Catherine's illness made Patricia's financial demands seem like natural extensions of established family dynamics. The contrast between Catherine's approach to parenting and Patricia's transactional relationship style was not immediately apparent to Alexandra, who had spent several years focused on practical survival rather than emotional development and personal growth. Catherine's emphasis on creativity, authenticity, and unconditional love had been replaced by Patricia's focus on efficiency, obligation, and conditional acceptance based on performance and financial contribution. By the time Alexandra completed high school and prepared for college, she had internalized belief systems that prioritized others' needs over her own aspirations, accepted financial obligation as expressions of family love, and viewed personal desires and creative interests as luxuries that should be subordinated to practical considerations and family responsibilities. The confident, creative child who had once written stories about strong female protagonists had evolved into a compliant young woman who accepted exploitation as normal family dynamics. The stage was set for a prolonged period of financial and emotional manipulation that would continue until Alexandra developed the courage and clarity necessary to recognize the fundamental difference between genuine family support and conditional acceptance based on her ability to meet Patricia's financial and emotional demands. The transformation back to her authentic self would require rediscovering the strength and independence that Catherine had cultivated during her childhood, combined with the practical skills and emotional maturity she had developed through surviving family crisis and premature adult responsibilities. The administrative coordinator position at Meridian Marketing Solutions represented Alexandra's first opportunity to establish professional credibility and develop career skills outside the controlled environment of Patricia's household management systems. The downtown Portland office occupied the 15th floor of a modern glass building, providing expansive views of the Willamette River and the surrounding urban landscape that reminded Alexandra daily of the broader world beyond her immediate family circumstances. Meridian Marketing Solutions specialized in developing promotional campaigns for medium-sized businesses throughout the Pacific Northwest, with particular expertise in digital marketing strategies and social media management services. The company employed approximately 40 staff members across departments including creative services, account management, digital strategy, and administrative support, creating a collaborative professional environment that differed significantly from the transactional atmosphere that characterized Alexandra's home life. Alexandra's responsibilities included coordinating project timelines between different departments, managing client communication systems, organizing meetings and presentations for senior staff members, and maintaining comprehensive documentation of campaign development processes and client feedback. The position required attention to detail, organizational skills, and communication abilities that aligned well with her academic background and natural competencies. The work environment at Meridian provided Alexandra with exposure to creative professionals who approached problem-solving with innovation and strategic thinking, rather than the rigid systems and predetermined outcomes that Patricia favored in household management. Alexandra observed graphic designers experimenting with visual concepts, copywriters developing persuasive messaging strategies, and account managers building collaborative relationships with clients based on mutual respect and shared objectives. The contrast between the supportive, encouraging workplace culture at Meridian and the conditional acceptance she experienced at home became increasingly apparent as Alexandra gained confidence in her professional abilities and received positive feedback from supervisors and colleagues. Her manager, Jennifer Torres, consistently praised Alexandra's reliability, creativity, and ability to anticipate project needs while contributing innovative solutions to operational challenges. Jennifer's leadership style emphasized employee development and professional growth through challenging assignments, constructive feedback, and opportunities to participate in strategic planning discussions that expanded Alexandra's understanding of business operations and marketing principles. This mentoring approach differed dramatically from Patricia's approach to guidance, which focused on compliance with predetermined expectations rather than development of independent thinking and creative problem-solving abilities. The financial compensation from Alexandra's position provided her first experience earning income that was not immediately subject to Patricia's tracking systems and allocation formulas. Her monthly salary of $3,400 represented financial independence that she had never previously experienced, despite the significant portions that would be dedicated to Patricia's accumulated expense charges and ongoing household contribution requirements. Patricia's response to Alexandra's employment included detailed analysis of the salary amount and development of updated financial obligations that would ensure Alexandra's increased income would benefit the household rather than enabling her transition to independent living arrangements. Patricia calculated that Alexandra's monthly contribution to household expenses should increase proportionally with her salary, while maintaining the existing payment schedule for accumulated historical expenses. The financial arrangement that Patricia proposed allocated approximately $1,500 monthly toward accumulated expenses and ongoing household contributions, leaving Alexandra with approximately $1,900 for personal expenses after taxes and benefit deductions. This remaining amount was insufficient to support independent housing in Portland's competitive rental market, while maintaining transportation, food, clothing, and other basic living expenses. Patricia's financial calculations included detailed projections of Alexandra's future earning potential and corresponding increases in household contribution expectations that would ensure her continued residence and financial obligation to the family unit. These projections assumed that Alexandra's career advancement would generate proportional increases in her financial responsibilities rather than opportunities for increased personal autonomy and independent decision-making. The psychological impact of receiving her first substantial paycheck while simultaneously being presented with detailed calculations of how the majority would be allocated to existing obligations created profound conflict for Alexandra between appreciation for her professional achievements and frustration with her continued financial dependence despite her employment success. The financial independence that employment typically provides was negated by Patricia's systematic approach to capturing the benefits of Alexandra's career advancement. Alexandra's daily routine during this period required careful navigation between her professional responsibilities at Meridian and her household obligations to Patricia's management systems. Her workday began at 7:30 in the morning with a 40-minute commute via public transportation that provided one of her few opportunities for personal reflection and mental preparation for the competing demands of her professional and domestic environments. The office environment at Meridian encouraged collaborative interaction, creative thinking, and professional development through informal mentoring relationships and project-based learning opportunities. Alexandra's colleagues included recent college graduates who shared apartments, pursued graduate education, traveled internationally, and developed romantic relationships without requiring approval or financial justification from family members. These observations highlighted the restrictions and obligations that characterized Alexandra's circumstances compared to typical experiences of young professionals establishing independent adult lives. Lunch breaks at Meridian often included group outings to nearby restaurants or coffee shops, where colleagues discussed career goals, weekend plans, and personal interests that reflected autonomy and self-determination in their lifestyle choices. Alexandra's participation in these social activities was limited by financial constraints and time pressures that required her to return home promptly after work to fulfill household responsibilities and maintain compliance with Patricia's scheduling expectations. The contrast between her professional environment and domestic circumstances became particularly pronounced during company social events and after-work activities that Alexandra was unable to attend due to Patricia's requirements for advance notification, budget approval, and justification of the time spent away from household responsibilities. These limitations prevented Alexandra from developing deeper workplace relationships and professional networking opportunities that could have supported her career advancement. Patricia's monitoring of Alexandra's work schedule included detailed questioning about overtime requirements, project deadlines, and social activities that might affect her availability for household responsibilities. This surveillance created stress and anxiety about maintaining appropriate boundaries between her professional obligations and domestic expectations, while avoiding conflicts that could result in increased financial penalties or household restrictions. The documentation systems that Patricia maintained regarding Alexandra's activities and expenses extended to her professional life through tracking of work-related costs including transportation, professional clothing, and meals purchased during workdays. Patricia categorized these expenses as investments in Alexandra's earning potential that should generate corresponding returns through increased household contributions and accelerated payment of accumulated obligations. Alexandra's attempts to establish separate financial accounts or independent budgeting systems were complicated by Patricia's expectations of transparency and shared financial planning that would ensure Alexandra's resources were allocated appropriately to meet family obligations before personal desires or independent goals. The financial independence that typically accompanies steady employment was effectively prevented through Patricia's comprehensive approach to household financial management. The emotional toll of maintaining professional competence and workplace relationships, while managing the stress and constraints of Patricia's domestic control systems, created fatigue and anxiety that affected Alexandra's job performance and personal well-being. The energy required to navigate between these conflicting environments left limited resources for personal development, social relationships, or recreational activities that could provide emotional balance and perspective. Alexandra's living space within the household consisted of the same bedroom she had occupied since high school, furnished with the twin bed, small dresser, and basic desk, that reflected her status as a dependent family member rather than an adult professional with her own income and career responsibilities. The room's limited space and lack of privacy prevented her from establishing the personal environment that would support her transition to independent adulthood. The shared household spaces were organized according to Patricia's preferences and requirements, with limited accommodation for Alexandra's personal belongings, professional materials, or individual lifestyle choices. The kitchen, living areas, and recreational spaces reflected Patricia's aesthetic and functional priorities, reinforcing Alexandra's position as a guest, rather than an equal member of the household despite her substantial financial contributions. Patricia's control over household decision-making extended to temperature settings, television programming, meal planning, and visitor policies that prevented Alexandra from exercising normal adult autonomy within her own residence. These restrictions reinforced her dependent status despite her professional achievements and financial contributions to household operations. The social isolation that resulted from Patricia's restrictions on Alexandra's activities and relationships prevented her from developing the support networks and independent relationships that typically enable young adults to gain perspective on their family circumstances and develop confidence in their own judgment and decision-making abilities. The absence of external validation and alternative perspectives made it difficult for Alexandra to recognize the abnormal nature of her domestic situation. Alexandra's romantic relationships were particularly constrained by Patricia's expectations of advance notification, approval of dating partners, and detailed reporting of social activities that extended beyond normal parental concern into invasive monitoring and control. These requirements effectively prevented Alexandra from developing intimate relationships that might provide emotional support and alternative perspectives on healthy family dynamics. The combination of professional success and domestic restriction created internal conflict and confusion about Alexandra's identity and capabilities. Her workplace achievements demonstrated competence and independence that contradicted Patricia's characterization of her as requiring continued guidance and financial obligation to the family unit. This cognitive dissonance created stress and self-doubt that interfered with Alexandra's ability to recognize her own strengths and advocate for appropriate treatment. The daily reality of Alexandra's circumstances involved constant navigation between the empowering, respectful environment of her workplace and the controlling, transactional atmosphere of her home life. This contrast highlighted the fundamental problems with Patricia's approach to family relationships, while simultaneously demonstrating Alexandra's capacity for professional success and independent achievement when provided with appropriate support and recognition. The stage was being set for Alexandra to recognize that the financial and emotional constraints imposed by Patricia represented exploitation rather than legitimate family obligation. The professional competence and workplace relationships she was developing would eventually provide the foundation and motivation necessary to challenge Patricia's control and demand appropriate respect for her contributions and autonomy as an adult family member, with her own rights and legitimate expectations for supportive rather than exploitative family relationships. The escalation of Patricia's financial demands coincided with Robert's increasing dependency on her management systems and Alexandra's professional success at Meridian Marketing Solutions. What had initially presented as organized household administration gradually evolved into comprehensive control over every aspect of Alexandra's personal and financial autonomy, justified through increasingly elaborate explanations of family obligation and mutual responsibility. Patricia's documentation systems expanded beyond simple expense tracking to include detailed evaluations of Alexandra's contributions to household emotional stability, her participation in family activities, and what Patricia characterized as her investment in maintaining family unity during challenging periods. These evaluations became the basis for additional charges and obligation categories that appeared on Alexandra's monthly statements with the same legitimacy as utility bills and grocery expenses. The emotional labor charges that Patricia introduced during Alexandra's second year of professional employment included compensation for what she described as psychological support services, conflict resolution assistance, and family coordination activities that enabled Robert and Alexandra to maintain stable relationships despite their different perspectives on household management and financial responsibility. Patricia calculated these services at $25 per hour for time spent in family discussions, mediation sessions, and emotional guidance conversations. Patricia's methodology for determining emotional labor costs involved detailed time tracking of conversations, advice sessions, and what she categorized as therapeutic interventions that prevented family conflicts and maintained household harmony. She maintained comprehensive logs documenting the duration and content of discussions about Alexandra's career goals, relationship concerns, and future planning, with detailed calculations of the professional counseling rates that would apply to similar services if obtained through external providers. The complexity of Patricia's billing systems reached extraordinary levels as she developed separate categories for different types of household contributions and family services. Administrative support charges covered time spent managing Alexandra's medical appointments, tax preparation assistance, and coordination of professional networking opportunities. Educational guidance fees included compensation for career advice, resume review services, and strategic planning sessions related to Alexandra's professional development and advancement goals. Robert's response to Patricia's expanding financial management systems reflected his appreciation for her organizational abilities and his desire to maintain harmony in their marriage while ensuring that Alexandra received appropriate preparation for complete financial independence. He had struggled with household management since Catherine's death and relied heavily on Patricia's systematic approach to provide structure and predictability that reduced his stress and decision-making responsibilities. The burden of mediating between Patricia's expectations and Alexandra's growing frustration with the financial obligations fell primarily on Robert, who found himself in the uncomfortable position of supporting his wife's methods, while recognizing that the financial arrangements might be creating unreasonable pressure on his daughter. His attempts to address Alexandra's concerns while maintaining marital harmony resulted in compromises that typically favored Patricia's position, while offering minor concessions that provided temporary relief without addressing the fundamental problems. Robert's employment situation became increasingly demanding during this period, as his construction management firm expanded operations and required longer hours, more travel, and additional responsibilities that limited his availability for household activities and family discussions. His physical and emotional absence from daily family interactions allowed Patricia's influence to expand unchallenged, while reducing Alexandra's access to alternative perspectives on her circumstances and obligations. The financial pressure created by Patricia's expanded billing systems coincided with Alexandra's desire to pursue graduate education that would enhance her career prospects and increase her earning potential. Several colleagues at Meridian Marketing Solutions had completed MBA programs through evening and weekend classes that allowed them to advance to senior positions with substantially higher salaries and greater professional autonomy. Alexandra's research into graduate programs revealed options for part-time study that would accommodate her work schedule while providing the advanced education necessary for career advancement in marketing and business development. The Portland State University MBA program offered evening classes and flexible scheduling that seemed compatible with her current employment, with tuition costs that could be managed through a combination of employer assistance, student loans, and personal savings. Patricia's response to Alexandra's graduate education plans included detailed financial analysis of the opportunity costs and resource allocation implications associated with pursuing advanced education while maintaining existing household obligations and payment schedules. She calculated that the time and money invested in graduate education would reduce Alexandra's availability for household responsibilities and delay her ability to accelerate payments on accumulated family expenses. The comprehensive cost-benefit analysis that Patricia prepared regarding Alexandra's educational goals included projections of increased earning potential offset by tuition expenses, reduced household contribution capacity, and what Patricia characterized as the family's investment in supporting Alexandra's career development through reduced household service expectations during her study periods. These calculations concluded that graduate education would benefit Alexandra individually while creating financial burden for the household that required compensation through extended payment schedules and increased future contribution commitments. Patricia's alternative recommendation involved Alexandra focusing on immediate career advancement through additional responsibilities at her current position, rather than pursuing expensive graduate education that would create debt obligations and reduce her current income availability for family contributions. She suggested that Alexandra's career development would be more effectively served through gaining practical experience and professional certifications that would provide advancement opportunities without the time and financial costs associated with formal degree programs. The conflict over graduate education plans created the first significant disagreement between Alexandra and Patricia since the establishment of their financial arrangements. Alexandra recognized that advanced education represented her most viable path toward achieving sufficient income to meet Patricia's financial expectations, while eventually establishing independent living arrangements and autonomous financial management. Patricia's opposition to Alexandra's educational plans was accompanied by detailed documentation of the additional household responsibilities and service obligations that would be required to compensate for the reduced time availability and financial resources that would result from graduate school enrollment. These compensation requirements included increased weekend household service hours, additional administrative support for Patricia's own professional activities, and expanded childcare responsibilities for Patricia's niece, who visited regularly during summer months. The emotional manipulation that Patricia employed to discourage Alexandra's graduate education plans included expressions of disappointment about Alexandra's apparent lack of appreciation for the family's investment in her development, and concern about her prioritization of personal advancement over family stability and unity. Patricia characterized Alexandra's desire for graduate education as selfish ambition that would burden the family financially, while providing benefits primarily to Alexandra, rather than contributing to collective household welfare. Robert's position on Alexandra's graduate education plans reflected his recognition of the importance of advanced education for career success, combined with his concern about the financial implications for household stability and his marriage to Patricia. His suggested compromise involved Alexandra delaying graduate school enrollment for 2 years, while accelerating payments on existing family obligations and building savings that would reduce the financial impact of tuition expenses on household operations. The stress created by the graduate education conflict affected Alexandra's performance at work as she struggled to maintain professional focus while managing the emotional and financial pressures associated with family obligations and future planning. Her supervisor, Jennifer Torres, noticed changes in Alexandra's energy and enthusiasm and offered to discuss any personal or professional challenges that might be affecting her work experience and career development. Alexandra's conversation with Jennifer about her family circumstances marked the first time she had described Patricia's financial management systems to someone outside the household. Jennifer's reaction of surprise and concern about the complexity and scope of the financial obligations helped Alexandra recognize that her family's approach to expense sharing and contribution expectations differed significantly from normal family financial arrangements. Jennifer's perspective on family financial relationships was based on her own experience growing up in a household where adult children contributed to shared expenses without detailed tracking systems or formal repayment obligations for childhood support and guidance. Her parents had expected reasonable contributions to household operations while encouraging their children's educational advancement and career development as investments in their future success and independence. The contrast between Jennifer's family experience and Alexandra's circumstances highlighted the unusual nature of Patricia's approach to family financial management and raised questions about whether the detailed tracking and obligation systems represented normal parental expectations or something more problematic and controlling. Jennifer's concern about the impact of family financial pressure on Alexandra's professional development and personal well-being provided validation for Alexandra's growing discomfort with her domestic situation. The conversation with Jennifer also revealed the extent to which Alexandra's family circumstances were preventing her from participating in normal professional and social activities that would support her career advancement and personal development. Jennifer pointed out that Alexandra's limited availability for after-work networking events, professional development activities, and social relationships was constraining her opportunities for advancement and preventing her from developing the professional connections that would support her long-term career success. The recognition that Patricia's management systems were actively hindering, rather than supporting Alexandra's professional and personal development, created cognitive dissonance that forced her to reconsider the legitimacy and appropriateness of her family's financial arrangements. The realization that her circumstances differed significantly from normal family expectations initiated a process of critical evaluation that would eventually lead to fundamental changes in her relationship with Patricia and her understanding of appropriate family obligations. The mounting tension between Alexandra's professional growth and personal aspirations and Patricia's increasingly demanding financial and service expectations created an unsustainable situation that would require resolution through either complete compliance with Patricia's control systems or decisive action to establish appropriate boundaries and autonomous adult relationships. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would force Alexandra to choose between continued acquiescence and the courage necessary to challenge the exploitative dynamics that had characterized her family relationships for the previous several years. The revelation that would fundamentally alter Alexandra's understanding of her circumstances emerged through an unexpected encounter during her lunch break on a particularly stressful Tuesday in March. She had sought refuge in Pioneer Courthouse Square after a challenging morning of managing multiple project deadlines while processing Patricia's latest monthly financial statement, which had included new categories of charges for what Patricia termed life coaching services and professional development coordination. Alexandra seated herself on one of the concrete steps facing the square's central fountain, unwrapping the simple sandwich she had prepared at home to avoid the expense of purchasing lunch downtown. The financial constraints imposed by her monthly obligations to Patricia meant that even modest purchases like restaurant meals required careful consideration and advance budgeting that transformed routine decisions into complex calculations of cost versus necessity. As she reviewed her work notes and prepared for the afternoon's client presentation, Alexandra overheard a conversation between two women seated nearby who were discussing their family circumstances with remarkable candor. The younger woman, who appeared to be approximately Alexandra's age, was describing her recent decision to establish financial boundaries with her mother, following years of what she characterized as excessive financial demands and emotional manipulation. The woman, who introduced herself to her companion as Rebecca, explained that her mother had maintained detailed financial records of childhood expenses and had presented Rebecca with a comprehensive accounting of costs associated with her upbringing when Rebecca graduated from college and secured her first professional position. The mother had calculated these expenses at approximately $42,000 and had requested that Rebecca begin making monthly payments toward this obligation as demonstration of her appreciation for the sacrifices made on her behalf. Rebecca's description of her mother's financial tracking systems and expectation of repayment for childhood support expenses resonated powerfully with Alexandra's own circumstances, creating an immediate sense of recognition and validation that someone else had experienced similar family dynamics. The specific details of Rebecca's situation differed from Alexandra's relationship with Patricia, but the fundamental patterns of financial manipulation and control were remarkably consistent. The companion listening to Rebecca's story responded with expressions of surprise and concern about the appropriateness of charging adult children for childhood support expenses. She characterized Rebecca's mother's approach as unusual and potentially exploitative, emphasizing that parental obligations to provide financial support for minor children represented legal requirements rather than loans or investments that required future repayment from the children who received such support. Rebecca's friend, who identified herself as an attorney specializing in family law, explained that parents are legally obligated to provide financial support, housing, food, medical care, and educational opportunities for their minor children without expectation of repayment or future financial obligation from those children. She emphasized that attempts to create debt relationships based on childhood support expenses represented fundamental misunderstanding of parental legal obligations and family relationship dynamics. The attorney's explanation of parental financial obligations provided Alexandra with her first exposure to legal perspectives on family financial relationships and the boundaries between appropriate contribution expectations and exploitative manipulation. She learned that while adult children might choose to contribute to family household expenses or provide financial assistance to parents facing economic difficulties, such contributions should represent voluntary expressions of appreciation, rather than mandatory repayment of calculated childhood expenses. The conversation continued with Rebecca describing the process through which she had recognized the problematic nature of her mother's financial demands and had decided to establish appropriate boundaries regarding her financial contributions and family obligations. Rebecca explained that she had initially attempted to negotiate reduced payment amounts and extended repayment schedules, but had gradually realized that the fundamental premise of owing repayment for childhood support was inappropriate, regardless of the specific financial arrangements. Rebecca's decision to refuse continued payments toward her mother's calculated childhood expenses had resulted in significant family conflict and temporary estrangement, but it ultimately led to improved relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. She described the relief and empowerment that had resulted from recognizing her right to financial autonomy and her ability to choose the extent and nature of her voluntary contributions to family welfare. The attorney provided Rebecca with additional validation by explaining that many families struggle with appropriate boundaries regarding adult children's financial contributions, and that manipulation through guilt, obligation, and detailed financial tracking represents emotionally abusive behavior that often requires professional intervention or legal assistance to resolve effectively. She emphasized that healthy family relationships should be characterized by mutual respect and voluntary cooperation rather than systematic financial exploitation. Alexandra's eavesdropping on this conversation provided her with external validation of her growing concerns about Patricia's financial management systems, and gave her vocabulary and conceptual framework for understanding her circumstances as potentially exploitative, rather than representing normal family expectations. The realization that other families had experienced similar dynamics and had successfully established appropriate boundaries offered hope that change might be possible in her own situation. The immediate impact of this overheard conversation was Alexandra's recognition that Patricia's detailed financial tracking and repayment expectations were not universal family practices, but represented an unusual and potentially inappropriate approach to family financial relationships. The attorney's explanation of parental obligations provided Alexandra with legal context that contradicted Patricia's characterization of her childhood expenses as debts requiring repayment. Alexandra's emotional response to this revelation included relief at discovering that her discomfort with Patricia's financial demands had been appropriate and valid, rather than representing ingratitude or unreasonable resistance to legitimate family obligations. The validation provided by Rebecca's similar experience and the attorney's professional perspective gave Alexandra permission to question Patricia's authority and expectations in ways she had not previously considered. The conversation also highlighted the possibility that Patricia's behavior might represent a pattern of manipulation and control that extended beyond unusual family financial practices, to include emotionally abusive dynamics that were specifically designed to maintain Alexandra's dependence and prevent her transition to autonomous adult relationships and independent living arrangements. Alexandra spent the remainder of her lunch break processing the implications of what she had learned, and considering how this new information related to her own circumstances and the financial obligations that had dominated her family relationships for the previous several years. She began to recognize that her acceptance of Patricia's financial tracking systems had been based on Patricia's authority and expertise, rather than on objective evaluation of the appropriateness and legitimacy of such arrangements. The attorney's explanation of parental legal obligations prompted Alexandra to consider researching family law and financial relationship boundaries to develop better understanding of her rights and options regarding Patricia's financial demands. She realized that her previous acceptance of Patricia's financial management systems had been based on limited information and lack of external perspectives, rather than on informed consent or legitimate obligation. Alexandra's return to work that afternoon was characterized by renewed energy and focus as she processed the possibility that her family circumstances might be subject to change through appropriate boundary setting and assertion of her rights as an autonomous adult. The conversation she had overheard provided hope that resolution of her circumstances was possible, and that other people had successfully navigated similar challenges. The impact of this revelation extended to Alexandra's professional performance and workplace relationships, as she began to recognize that her previous limitations regarding social activities, professional development opportunities, and career advancement had been artificially imposed through Patricia's control systems, rather than representing natural consequences of legitimate family obligations and financial responsibilities. Jennifer Torres noticed the positive change in Alexandra's demeanor and energy during their afternoon project review meeting, and commented on her renewed enthusiasm and creative contributions to the client presentation planning process. Alexandra's improved mood and increased confidence reflected the hope and empowerment that resulted from recognizing that her circumstances were neither permanent nor entirely beyond her control. The conversation Alexandra had overheard also provided her with specific strategies and approaches for addressing family financial manipulation, including the possibility of seeking legal consultation to understand her rights and options regarding Patricia's financial demands. Rebecca's successful establishment of appropriate boundaries demonstrated that confronting manipulative family dynamics was possible and could result in improved relationships and increased personal autonomy. Alexandra began to recognize that her professional competence and workplace success provided evidence of her ability to function independently and make sound decisions without Patricia's oversight and management. The contrast between her confident, effective performance at work and her compliance with Patricia's restrictive household management systems highlighted the artificial nature of her domestic dependence and suggested that her capabilities extended far beyond what Patricia acknowledged or encouraged. The possibility of challenging Patricia's financial demands and establishing appropriate boundaries required careful planning and preparation, including research into legal rights, development of financial independence strategies, and creation of support systems that would sustain Alexandra through the conflict and family disruption that would likely result from asserting her autonomy and refusing continued compliance with exploitative financial arrangements. Alexandra's growing awareness of the inappropriate nature of her family circumstances created motivation for change, while simultaneously generating anxiety about the practical challenges and potential consequences associated with confronting Patricia's control systems and demanding appropriate respect for her rights as an autonomous adult family member. The stage was being set for Alexandra to transition from passive acceptance of manipulative family dynamics to active resistance and self-advocacy that would ultimately lead to legal confrontation and the dramatic resolution promised in her story's opening. The external validation and professional perspective she had gained through the overheard conversation provided the foundation and confidence necessary to begin challenging the exploitative relationship patterns that had constrained her development and prevented her from achieving the independence and respect she deserved. The transformative conversation Alexandra had overheard in Pioneer Courthouse Square catalyzed a systematic investigation into family financial relationships and legal boundaries that would fundamentally reshape her understanding of her circumstances. Armed with specific terminology and legal concepts provided by the attorney's explanation of parental obligations, Alexandra began conducting comprehensive research during her evening hours and weekend time to develop a thorough understanding of her rights and options. The Portland Public Library's legal reference section became Alexandra's primary research destination during the weeks following her revelation. The family law resources available through the library's database provided detailed information about parental financial obligations, adult children's rights regarding family financial arrangements, and legal precedents governing disputes over childhood support expenses and family financial manipulation. Alexandra's research methodology involved systematic examination of Oregon family law statutes, court cases involving financial disputes between parents and adult children, and legal guidance documents published by the Oregon State Bar Association regarding family financial relationships and boundary issues. She maintained detailed notes documenting relevant legal principles, statutory requirements, and judicial decisions that pertain to her specific circumstances. The legal research process revealed that Oregon law clearly establishes parental obligations to provide financial support for minor children without creating debt relationships or future repayment expectations. The statutes specifically prohibit parents from charging adult children for expenses associated with basic childhood needs, including housing, food, clothing, medical care, and educational support through high school completion. Alexandra discovered that attempts to create debt obligations based on childhood support expenses could potentially constitute financial exploitation under Oregon's elder abuse and family manipulation statutes, even when the manipulation targets adult children rather than elderly family members. The legal definitions of financial exploitation included systematic extraction of resources through fraud, coercion, or manipulation of family relationships and obligations. The court cases that Alexandra reviewed provided examples of judicial responses to similar family financial disputes, including instances where judges had ruled that parental demands for repayment of childhood expenses were inappropriate and unenforceable. These cases established legal precedents that supported adult children's rights to refuse payment demands based on childhood support costs, and provided specific language that judges had used to characterize such demands as exploitative and manipulative. Alexandra's research extended beyond legal statutes and court cases to include psychological and social work literature, addressing family financial manipulation, emotional abuse through financial control, and recovery strategies for individuals who had experienced systematic exploitation through family relationships. These resources provided validation for her emotional responses to Patricia's behavior and offered practical guidance for establishing appropriate boundaries and seeking professional support. The psychological research revealed that financial manipulation within family relationships typically involves several specific patterns that Alexandra recognized in her own circumstances. These patterns include systematic documentation of expenses to create artificial debt obligations, graduated escalation of financial demands over time, emotional manipulation to enforce compliance with payment expectations, and isolation from external perspectives that might challenge the appropriateness of the financial arrangements. Alexandra learned that individuals who experience family financial manipulation often struggle with guilt, self-doubt, and confusion about their rights and obligations due to the manipulative nature of the relationship dynamics. The research emphasized that recovery from such manipulation requires external validation, professional support, and decisive action to establish appropriate boundaries and refuse continued participation in exploitative arrangements. The educational resources that Alexandra consulted provided specific strategies for confronting family financial manipulation, including documentation of exploitative demands, consultation with legal professionals, development of financial independence plans, and creation of support networks that could provide encouragement and perspective throughout the boundary-setting process. These strategies offered practical guidance for translating her growing awareness into effective action. Alexandra's investigation also included research into Patricia's background and professional qualifications to better understand whether her systematic approach to family financial management reflected legitimate expertise or represented manipulation disguised as professional competence. She discovered that Patricia's administrative experience in dental office management did not include formal training in family financial planning, psychological counseling, or legal advisory services despite her provision of these services within their household. The contrast between Patricia's claimed expertise in family financial management and her actual qualifications raised questions about the authority and legitimacy of her detailed tracking systems and payment calculations. Alexandra recognized that her previous acceptance of Patricia's financial arrangements had been based on assumed competence, rather than verified expertise or legitimate authority to create debt obligations based on childhood expenses. Alexandra's research process also involved careful examination of the specific financial documentation that Patricia had provided over the previous several years, including monthly statements, accumulated expense calculations, and projections of future payment obligations. She applied the legal principles and psychological insights gained through her research to evaluate the appropriateness and legitimacy of these financial demands. The detailed analysis of Patricia's financial documentation revealed numerous problematic elements, including charges for services that parents are legally obligated to provide without compensation, arbitrary allocation of household expenses to create artificial debt burdens, and emotional manipulation disguised as family financial planning. Alexandra recognized that many of the charges included in her accumulated obligations represented normal parental responsibilities rather than special services requiring repayment. Alexandra's growing understanding of the manipulative nature of her family financial arrangements was accompanied by increasing confidence in her ability to challenge these dynamics and demand appropriate respect for her rights as an autonomous adult. The legal research provided her with specific language and conceptual frameworks for articulating her position and defending her decision to refuse continued compliance with Patricia's payment demands. The research process also helped Alexandra recognize that her professional competence and workplace success demonstrated her capability for independent decision-making and financial management without Patricia's oversight and control. The contrast between her effective performance at Meridian Marketing Solutions and her compliance with Patricia's restrictive household management systems highlighted the artificial nature of her domestic dependence. Alexandra began developing strategic plans for confronting Patricia's financial demands and establishing appropriate boundaries regarding her contributions to household expenses and family financial obligations. These plans included consultation with legal professionals, development of independent financial resources, and preparation for the family conflict that would likely result from her assertion of autonomy and refusal to continue accepting exploitative treatment. The most significant aspect of Alexandra's research involved learning about her options for legal recourse if Patricia continued to demand repayment for childhood expenses or escalated her manipulation in response to Alexandra's boundary-setting efforts. She discovered that family courts have jurisdiction over disputes involving financial manipulation between family members, and that judges have broad authority to issue protective orders and financial sanctions against individuals who engage in systematic exploitation of family relationships. Alexandra's research revealed that successful resolution of family financial manipulation typically requires comprehensive documentation of the exploitative behavior, professional legal representation, and decisive action to enforce appropriate boundaries through formal legal proceedings when informal boundary-setting efforts prove insufficient. The legal system provided mechanisms for protecting individuals from continued financial exploitation and ensuring that manipulative family members could not continue their harmful behavior without consequences. The empowerment that Alexandra experienced through her research process reflected not only her growing understanding of her legal rights and options, but also her recognition of her own strength and capability for challenging the authority figures and family dynamics that had constrained her development for several years. The research provided her with both practical tools and psychological validation necessary for transitioning from passive compliance to active self-advocacy. Alexandra's comprehensive investigation into family financial relationships and legal boundaries created the foundation for the confrontation that would ultimately lead to her legal victory over Patricia's financial demands. The knowledge and confidence gained through her research process would prove essential for navigating the complex legal and family dynamics that would emerge, as she challenged the exploitative relationship patterns that had dominated her adult life. The stage was being set for Alexandra to transition from research and planning to direct action that would test Patricia's willingness to defend her financial demands in formal legal proceedings, where the appropriateness and legitimacy of her charges would be subject to objective evaluation by legal professionals with expertise in family financial relationships and manipulation patterns. Alexandra's discovery of her legal rights and options represented the crucial foundation that would enable her to pursue the dramatic legal confrontation promised in her story's opening, where Patricia's financial demands would finally face appropriate scrutiny and judicial evaluation that would expose their manipulative nature and provide Alexandra with the vindication and empowerment she had been seeking throughout her years of compliance with exploitative family financial arrangements. The comprehensive legal research that Alexandra had conducted provided her with theoretical understanding of her rights and legal options, but she recognized that successfully challenging Patricia's financial demands would require practical skills in negotiation, documentation, legal communication, and strategic planning that extended beyond academic knowledge of family law statutes and court precedents. Alexandra's professional responsibilities at Meridian Marketing Solutions provided her with a unique opportunity to develop many of the skills that would prove essential for her eventual legal confrontation with Patricia. Her daily work involved project documentation, client communication, conflict resolution, and strategic planning activities that were directly applicable to her personal circumstances, even though her colleagues and supervisors were unaware of the connection between her professional development and her family situation. The client presentation skills that Alexandra had developed through her marketing coordination responsibilities included research methodology, persuasive communication, evidence organization, and professional documentation techniques that would prove invaluable for presenting her case against Patricia's financial demands. Her experience coordinating complex projects with multiple stakeholders had taught her strategic thinking and systematic problem-solving approaches that could be applied to legal planning and family conflict resolution. Alexandra began deliberately seeking additional responsibilities at work that would enhance her capabilities in areas directly relevant to her personal legal challenges. She volunteered to assist with contract review processes, participated in client negotiation meetings, and requested training in documentation management systems that would improve her ability to organize and present evidence effectively in formal legal proceedings. Jennifer Torres recognized Alexandra's increased interest in professional development and provided opportunities for expanded responsibilities that included legal compliance coordination, dispute resolution support, and administrative oversight of complex client relationships. These assignments provided Alexandra with practical experience in legal documentation, formal communication protocols, and systematic evidence gathering that would prove directly applicable to her family situation. The contract review experience that Alexandra gained through her expanded workplace responsibilities taught her to identify problematic language, recognize potentially exploitative terms, and understand the legal implications of various agreement structures. She learned to analyze complex documents systematically and identify inconsistencies, inappropriate provisions, and potentially unenforceable requirements that might not be immediately apparent to individuals without legal training. Alexandra applied these contract analysis skills to the detailed financial documentation that Patricia had provided over the previous several years, examining the monthly statements, accumulated expense calculations, and projected payment obligations, with the same systematic approach she used for client contract evaluation. This analysis revealed numerous problematic elements, including vague service descriptions, arbitrary cost allocations, and inappropriate charges that would likely be considered unreasonable under legal scrutiny. The dispute resolution training that Alexandra received through Meridian's professional development program provided her with structured approaches to conflict management, negotiation strategy, and settlement discussion facilitation. She learned to identify underlying interests behind stated positions, develop creative solutions that address multiple party concerns, and maintain professional communication standards during emotionally charged discussions. Alexandra practiced these dispute resolution skills through workplace conflicts and client relationship challenges, developing confidence and competence in managing difficult conversations, and advocating for appropriate outcomes without allowing emotional reactions to compromise her effectiveness. These experiences provided her with essential preparation for the challenging family discussions that would be required to address Patricia's financial demands directly. The documentation management systems that Alexandra learned through her professional responsibilities included comprehensive record keeping, evidence organization, chronological timeline development, and systematic file management approaches that would prove essential for building a strong legal case against Patricia's financial manipulation. She developed expertise in creating clear, persuasive documentation that could withstand detailed scrutiny and support complex arguments effectively. Alexandra began applying these documentation management skills to her personal circumstances by creating comprehensive records of Patricia's financial demands, payment calculations, and communication regarding household obligations. She organized this information chronologically and categorically to identify patterns of escalation, inconsistencies in Patricia's explanations, and evidence of manipulative behavior that could support her legal position. The professional communication skills that Alexandra developed through client relationship management included formal letter writing, structured argument presentation, and persuasive communication techniques that maintained professionalism while advocating strongly for specific positions and outcomes. She learned to balance firmness with diplomacy and to communicate complex information clearly and convincingly to audiences with varying levels of technical knowledge. Alexandra's growing expertise in professional communication provided her with the ability to articulate her position regarding Patricia's financial demands in formal, legally appropriate language that would be suitable for legal proceedings, while maintaining the respectful tone required for family relationship preservation, if such preservation proved possible after boundary establishment. The strategic planning skills that Alexandra developed through project management responsibilities included goal setting, timeline development, resource allocation, risk assessment, and contingency planning techniques that were directly applicable to her personal legal planning process. She learned to anticipate potential obstacles, develop alternative approaches, and coordinate multiple activities simultaneously to achieve complex objectives. Alexandra applied these strategic planning skills to develop comprehensive plans for confronting Patricia's financial demands, including preparation for various potential outcomes, ranging from voluntary resolution through family discussion to formal legal proceedings requiring professional representation and court intervention. Her plans included detailed timelines, resource requirements, and fallback strategies that would enable her to respond effectively regardless of how Patricia chose to address her boundary-setting efforts. The research methodology that Alexandra refined through her professional responsibilities included systematic information gathering, source verification, comparative analysis, and synthesis of complex information from multiple sources into clear, actionable conclusions. These skills enhanced her ability to continue building her legal case and understanding her options as her situation developed. Alexandra's professional network at Meridian Marketing Solutions provided her with access to colleagues who possessed relevant expertise and experience that could support her personal legal planning process. Several co-workers had backgrounds in business law, contract negotiation, and dispute resolution that enabled them to provide informal guidance and perspective on her family financial situation without compromising client confidentiality or professional boundaries. The confidence that Alexandra gained through her successful professional development and expanded workplace responsibilities provided essential psychological preparation for the challenging process of confronting Patricia's manipulation and asserting her rights as an autonomous adult family member. Her professional achievements demonstrated her competence and capability, while providing evidence that contradicted Patricia's characterization of her as requiring continued oversight and financial obligation to the family unit. Alexandra's systematic skill development was complemented by her growing understanding of psychological dynamics, underlying financial manipulation and family control systems. She studied literature on emotional abuse recovery, boundary setting in difficult family relationships, and psychological strategies for maintaining clarity and determination when confronting manipulative behavior patterns. The psychological preparation that Alexandra undertook included developing personal affirmations and cognitive frameworks that would help her maintain confidence and clarity during the emotionally challenging process of confronting Patricia's financial demands, and potentially facing family conflict and manipulation attempts, designed to restore her compliance with existing arrangements. Alexandra learned to recognize and counter common manipulation techniques including guilt induction, threat escalation, emotional blackmail, and attempts to undermine her confidence and decision-making authority through questioning her motives, capabilities, and commitment to family relationships. This psychological preparation would prove essential for maintaining her resolve during the confrontation process. The practical skills that Alexandra developed also included financial planning and budgeting expertise that would enable her to demonstrate her capacity for independent financial management without Patricia's oversight and control systems. She learned to create comprehensive budgets, analyze spending patterns, and develop savings strategies that would support her transition to independent living arrangements if family conflict made continued household residence untenable. Alexandra's systematic preparation process created a comprehensive foundation of legal knowledge, practical skills, professional confidence, and psychological resilience that would prove essential for successfully challenging Patricia's financial manipulation and achieving the legal victory promised in her story's opening. Her careful preparation ensured that when the confrontation occurred, she would possess all the tools and capabilities necessary to present her case effectively and maintain her resolve throughout the challenging process of asserting her rights and demanding appropriate respect from her family members. The opportunity for Alexandra to test her developing skills and knowledge in a real-world confrontation with Patricia's financial manipulation emerged during the first week of June, when Patricia presented her with an unexpected invoice for what she termed graduate school counseling services, totaling $875. This charge represented compensation for the time Patricia had invested in researching Alexandra's educational options, preparing cost-benefit analyses, and providing guidance regarding career development strategies during their discussions about graduate school enrollment. Patricia's detailed invoice included itemized charges for research time spent investigating MBA programs, consultation fees for educational planning discussions, and administrative costs for document preparation and presentation of her analysis regarding the financial implications of Alexandra's academic goals. The invoice also included retroactive charges for similar services provided during Alexandra's undergraduate years, which Patricia characterized as educational guidance that had contributed significantly to Alexandra's professional success and career advancement. The presentation of this invoice represented a significant escalation in Patricia's financial demands and provided Alexandra with an immediate opportunity to implement the boundary-setting strategies and legal communication techniques she had been developing through her professional responsibilities and personal research. Rather than accepting the charges automatically or attempting to negotiate reduced payment amounts, Alexandra decided to challenge the legitimacy of the invoice directly using the knowledge and skills she had systematically developed. Alexandra's initial response to Patricia's graduate school counseling invoice involved careful documentation of the charges and systematic analysis of the services claimed to have been provided. She applied the contract review techniques learned through her professional responsibilities to examine Patricia's invoice for problematic elements, inappropriate charges, and potentially unenforceable requirements that could be challenged through formal dispute processes. The analysis revealed that Patricia's claimed services included many activities that fell within normal parental guidance expectations and did not represent specialized professional services requiring compensation. Educational discussions between parents and adult children, general career advice, and basic research assistance typically occur as natural components of supportive family relationships rather than as billable services requiring formal payment arrangements. Alexandra prepared a formal written response to Patricia's invoice using the professional communication skills developed through her work at Meridian Marketing Solutions. Her response document included systematic analysis of each claimed service, legal context regarding parental obligations and family relationship expectations, and clear statement of her position that the charges were inappropriate and would not be paid voluntarily. The formal response that Alexandra presented to Patricia represented her first direct challenge to the financial manipulation that had characterized their relationship for several years. The document was professionally formatted, legally sound, and clearly articulated without emotional language or personal attacks that could undermine its effectiveness or provide Patricia with opportunities to shift the discussion away from the substantive legal and financial issues. Alexandra's written response included specific references to Oregon family law statutes regarding parental obligations, court cases involving similar financial disputes between parents and adult children, and professional standards for educational counseling services that highlighted the inappropriate nature of Patricia's charges. The document demonstrated Alexandra's thorough understanding of relevant legal principles and her capability for independent research and analysis. Patricia's reaction to Alexandra's formal written challenge revealed the extent to which she had expected continued compliance with her financial demands without serious resistance or legal scrutiny. Her initial response included expressions of surprise and disappointment regarding Alexandra's apparent lack of appreciation for the time and effort invested in providing educational guidance and family support services. However, Patricia's surprise quickly transformed into attempts to defend the legitimacy of her charges through detailed explanations of the professional expertise and specialized knowledge she had applied to Alexandra's educational planning process. Patricia emphasized her administrative experience and organizational skills, while characterizing her services as professional-level consultation that warranted appropriate compensation based on prevailing market rates for similar services. Alexandra's systematic response to Patricia's defensive arguments demonstrated her growing confidence and competence in legal communication and dispute resolution processes. She maintained professional composure while systematically addressing each of Patricia's justifications and providing counter-arguments supported by legal precedent and professional standards for family financial relationships. The exchange that developed between Alexandra and Patricia regarding the graduate school counseling invoice provided Alexandra with valuable practical experience in managing difficult negotiations and maintaining clear boundaries, despite emotional manipulation and pressure tactics designed to restore her previous compliance patterns. Patricia employed various strategies including guilt induction, threat escalation, and attempts to characterize Alexandra's resistance as ingratitude and selfishness. Alexandra's ability to maintain professional communication standards while resisting Patricia's manipulation attempts validated the effectiveness of her systematic preparation and skill development process. She recognized the manipulation techniques that Patricia employed and responded with clear, factual communication that avoided emotional engagement while firmly maintaining her position regarding the inappropriate nature of the financial charges. The resolution of the graduate school counseling invoice dispute occurred when Alexandra informed Patricia that she would seek legal consultation regarding the appropriateness of the charges if Patricia continued to demand payment for services that fell within normal parental guidance expectations. This statement represented Alexandra's first explicit reference to potential legal action and demonstrated her willingness to escalate the dispute beyond informal family negotiation if necessary. Patricia's response to Alexandra's mention of legal consultation included immediate withdrawal of the graduate school counseling invoice and statements that she had merely been testing Alexandra's financial responsibility and commitment to fair contribution to family expenses. Patricia characterized the invoice as a learning exercise designed to help Alexandra develop better understanding of service valuation and professional consultation standards. Alexandra recognized Patricia's attempt to reframe the dispute as educational rather than exploitative, but she did not accept this explanation or express gratitude for the supposed learning opportunity. Instead, she maintained her position that the charges had been inappropriate, and used the successful resolution as validation of her growing understanding of appropriate family financial boundaries and her capability for effective self-advocacy. The successful challenge of Patricia's graduate school counseling invoice provided Alexandra with essential confidence and practical experience that would prove invaluable for addressing the larger financial obligations and systematic manipulation that characterized their overall relationship. The victory demonstrated that Patricia's authority and financial demands were not absolute and could be challenged successfully through appropriate preparation and professional communication. The psychological impact of this first successful confrontation included significant increases in Alexandra's self-confidence and recognition of her own capability for independent decision-making and effective advocacy. The experience provided concrete evidence that contradicted Patricia's characterization of her as requiring continued oversight and financial obligation to maintain family stability and support. Alexandra's colleagues at Meridian Marketing Solutions noticed positive changes in her professional demeanor and work performance that reflected the increased confidence and assertiveness she had developed through successfully challenging Patricia's financial manipulation. Her improved communication skills and strategic thinking abilities enhanced her workplace effectiveness and contributed to recognition of her potential for advancement and increased responsibilities. Jennifer Torres specifically commented on Alexandra's enhanced presentation skills and professional communication abilities during their quarterly performance review meeting. Jennifer noted that Alexandra demonstrated increased confidence in client interactions and showed improved capability for managing complex projects and difficult stakeholder relationships, skills that would support her continued career advancement and professional development. The success of Alexandra's first direct challenge to Patricia's financial demands also provided her with practical insights into Patricia's responses to resistance and boundary-setting efforts. She observed that Patricia's initial defensive reactions and manipulation attempts were followed by strategic withdrawal when faced with potential legal consequences, suggesting that Patricia's financial demands might not withstand formal legal scrutiny and court evaluation. This observation encouraged Alexandra to consider more comprehensive challenges to Patricia's accumulated financial demands and systematic manipulation patterns. The graduate school counseling invoice dispute had provided a limited test case that demonstrated the effectiveness of her preparation and approach, but the larger financial obligations and fundamental relationship dynamics required more substantial intervention and formal boundary establishment. Alexandra began developing plans for addressing the comprehensive financial documentation that Patricia had accumulated over several years, including the $28,000 obligation calculation and ongoing monthly contribution requirements that represented the core elements of their financial relationship. The successful resolution of the graduate school counseling invoice provided both practical experience and psychological preparation for the more significant confrontation that would be required to establish appropriate boundaries and achieve genuine independence. The stage was being set for Alexandra to transition from successful management of individual disputes to comprehensive challenge of the entire financial manipulation system that Patricia had constructed around their family relationships. Her first small victory provided essential validation of her approach and capabilities, while building momentum toward the dramatic legal confrontation that would ultimately expose the full extent of Patricia's inappropriate behavior and provide Alexandra with complete vindication and empowerment. The successful resolution of the graduate school counseling invoice dispute marked the beginning of a transformative period in Alexandra's personal and professional development that would establish the foundation for her ultimate legal victory over Patricia's comprehensive financial manipulation system. The confidence gained through her first direct confrontation with Patricia's exploitative demands catalyzed significant improvements in her workplace performance and strategic thinking abilities that attracted positive attention from colleagues and supervisors at Meridian Marketing Solutions. Jennifer Torres recognized the substantial changes in Alexandra's professional demeanor and communication effectiveness during their July performance review meeting. She noted that Alexandra demonstrated enhanced confidence in client presentations, improved strategic thinking in project planning sessions, and increased assertiveness in advocating for creative solutions to complex marketing challenges. These observations led Jennifer to recommend Alexandra for promotion to Senior Administrative Coordinator with expanded responsibilities and a salary increase that would significantly improve her financial position. The promotion opportunity represented more than professional advancement for Alexandra. It provided external validation of her competence and capabilities that directly contradicted Patricia's systematic efforts to maintain her dependence through financial obligation and emotional manipulation. The recognition of her professional value by objective workplace evaluators demonstrated that her abilities extended far beyond Patricia's restricted acknowledgement and created concrete evidence of her capacity for independent success and autonomous decision-making. Alexandra's enhanced salary and expanded responsibilities at Meridian enabled her to begin developing financial independence strategies that would reduce her vulnerability to Patricia's manipulation while building resources necessary for potential legal action. The additional monthly income of $600 provided her with greater flexibility in managing her expenses and created opportunities for savings accumulation that could support independent living arrangements if family relationships deteriorated beyond repair. The professional development opportunities that accompanied Alexandra's promotion included participation in advanced training programs focused on contract negotiation, client relationship management, and strategic business planning. These educational experiences enhanced her understanding of legal principles governing business relationships, while providing practical skills in documentation, negotiation strategy, and formal dispute resolution that were directly applicable to her personal circumstances. Alexandra's increased visibility within Meridian's organizational structure provided her with access to colleagues who possessed relevant expertise in legal matters, financial planning, and family relationship dynamics. Several senior staff members shared their own experiences with challenging family circumstances and provided informal guidance regarding boundary-setting strategies, professional consultation resources, and legal options for addressing financial manipulation and emotional abuse within family relationships. The supportive professional environment at Meridian contrasted sharply with the controlling atmosphere that Patricia maintained in their household. Alexandra's colleagues treated her as a competent professional whose opinions and contributions were valued and respected, while Patricia continued to characterize her as requiring oversight and financial obligation to maintain family stability. This contrast became increasingly apparent and psychologically significant as Alexandra gained confidence in her professional abilities and external recognition of her competence. Alexandra's growing professional network provided her with access to legal consultation resources through colleagues who maintained relationships with attorneys specializing in family law and financial dispute resolution. These connections enabled her to obtain preliminary legal advice regarding her circumstances without alerting Patricia to her plans or creating immediate family conflict that could compromise her strategic position. The informal legal consultation that Alexandra obtained through her professional network confirmed her research findings regarding the inappropriate nature of Patricia's financial demands and provided specific guidance regarding her options for formal legal action. The attorney who provided this preliminary consultation emphasized that systematic financial exploitation within family relationships represented serious legal violations that courts addressed through protective orders, financial restitution requirements, and sanctions against manipulative family members. Alexandra learned that her comprehensive documentation of Patricia's financial demands and manipulation tactics provided strong evidence that would support formal legal proceedings if informal resolution attempts proved unsuccessful. The systematic approach she had taken to record-keeping and evidence-gathering demonstrated her preparation and commitment to achieving resolution through appropriate legal channels, rather than emotional confrontation or family manipulation. The legal consultation also provided Alexandra with realistic expectations regarding the timeline, costs, and potential outcomes associated with formal legal action against Patricia's financial demands. She learned that family financial dispute cases typically required several months to resolve through court proceedings, but that the strength of her evidence and the clear legal violations involved in Patricia's behavior suggested favorable prospects for successful resolution. Alexandra's increased confidence and strategic thinking abilities enabled her to begin developing comprehensive plans for challenging the entire system of financial manipulation that Patricia had constructed around their relationship. Rather than addressing individual disputes reactively, she began preparing for systematic confrontation of all accumulated charges and future financial obligations through coordinated legal and practical actions. The strategic planning process that Alexandra undertook drew extensively on the project management and systematic problem-solving skills developed through her professional responsibilities. She created detailed timelines coordinating legal consultation, evidence preparation, financial independence strategies, and family communication approaches that would maximize her chances of successful resolution while minimizing potential negative consequences for her career and personal well-being. Alexandra's growing recognition of her own capabilities and rights as an autonomous adult enabled her to begin rejecting Patricia's characterization of their relationship as benevolent guidance, requiring grateful compliance and financial compensation. She recognized that healthy family relationships should provide support without creating debt obligations, and that Patricia's systematic tracking and payment expectations represented exploitation rather than legitimate family financial management. The psychological transformation that accompanied Alexandra's professional advancement and successful boundary-setting experiences included fundamental changes in her self-perception and understanding of appropriate family relationship dynamics. She began to recognize that her compliance with Patricia's demands had been based on manipulation and false authority rather than legitimate obligation or gratitude for genuine support and guidance. Alexandra's colleagues at Meridian noticed significant improvements in her assertiveness and professional communication skills that reflected her growing confidence and self-advocacy abilities. Her increased willingness to contribute ideas during meetings, advocate for creative project approaches, and assume leadership responsibilities demonstrated personal growth that extended beyond her specific workplace duties to encompass broader confidence in her judgment and capabilities. The positive feedback that Alexandra received from clients and senior staff members regarding her expanded role and enhanced performance provided additional validation of her competence and professional value. Client satisfaction surveys specifically mentioned her thoroughness, reliability, and creative problem-solving abilities, while senior management recognized her potential for continued advancement within the organization. Jennifer Torres began including Alexandra in strategic planning discussions and senior-level meetings that provided her with exposure to executive decision-making processes and advanced business management techniques. These opportunities enhanced Alexandra's understanding of organizational leadership while providing practical experience in high-level communication and strategic thinking that would support her personal legal planning and family relationship management. The recognition of Alexandra's professional growth by objective workplace evaluators created cognitive dissonance with Patricia's continued treatment of her as requiring supervision and financial obligation to the family unit. This contrast became increasingly difficult for Alexandra to reconcile and provided motivation for comprehensive resolution of the family financial manipulation that constrained her personal development and autonomous decision-making. Alexandra began to recognize that her professional success and workplace recognition demonstrated her readiness for complete independence from Patricia's control systems and financial manipulation. Her proven competence in complex project management, client relationship development, and strategic planning provided evidence of her capability for autonomous adult functioning without requiring Patricia's oversight or guidance services. The financial resources that Alexandra accumulated through her salary increase and systematic savings provided her with greater flexibility and reduced vulnerability to Patricia's manipulation attempts. Her improved financial position enabled her to consider independent living arrangements while building resources necessary for legal consultation and formal dispute resolution if Patricia refused to accept voluntary boundary-setting efforts. Alexandra's comprehensive preparation for challenging Patricia's financial manipulation system reflected the strategic thinking and systematic approach that characterized her professional work at Meridian Marketing Solutions. She applied the same methodical planning and evidence-based decision-making techniques to her personal circumstances that had contributed to her workplace success and professional recognition. The stage was being set for Alexandra to transition from successful individual dispute resolution to comprehensive confrontation of the entire financial manipulation system that Patricia had developed. Her growing confidence, professional recognition, financial resources, and strategic preparation created the foundation necessary for the dramatic legal confrontation that would ultimately provide complete resolution of her circumstances and full vindication of her rights as an autonomous adult family member deserving of respect and appropriate treatment. The substantial progress that Alexandra had achieved in building confidence and developing strategic capabilities faced a severe test during the late summer months, when Patricia launched a coordinated campaign designed to reassert control and prevent further erosion of her authority over Alexandra's financial and personal decisions. This counterattack represented Patricia's recognition that Alexandra's growing independence posed a fundamental threat to the exploitative relationship dynamics that had provided Patricia with significant financial benefits and psychological control for several years. Patricia's escalation began with the presentation of a comprehensive financial audit that recalculated Alexandra's accumulated obligations based on updated service valuations and expanded expense categories that had not previously appeared in their financial arrangements. The revised calculation increased Alexandra's total debt to Patricia from the original $28,000 to $41,700, incorporating charges for what Patricia characterized as crisis management services, professional development coordination, and family stability maintenance activities that she claimed had been provided throughout their relationship. The crisis management services that Patricia retroactively added to Alexandra's financial obligations included compensation for emotional support provided during Alexandra's college adjustment period, career guidance during her job search process, and household management assistance during her transition to full-time employment. Patricia calculated these services at professional counseling rates and applied them retroactively to their entire relationship history, creating substantial additional debt obligations that would extend Alexandra's payment schedule by several years. Patricia's professional development coordination charges encompassed time spent researching Alexandra's career options, networking activities conducted on Alexandra's behalf, and strategic planning sessions related to Alexandra's professional advancement goals. These charges were calculated at consulting rates that reflected Patricia's claimed expertise in human resources and career development, despite her lack of formal qualifications or professional credentials in these areas. The Family Stability Maintenance Services represented Patricia's most ambitious attempt to monetize normal family relationship activities by characterizing routine household interactions as specialized therapeutic interventions that prevented family dysfunction and maintained emotional equilibrium within their household. These charges included compensation for conflict mediation, stress reduction activities, and what Patricia described as preventative mental health services that had enabled Alexandra to function effectively despite the challenges associated with her mother's death and family financial pressures. Alexandra's initial response to Patricia's financial audit revealed the extent to which her confidence and analytical capabilities had developed through her professional experiences and legal research activities. Rather than accepting the expanded charges automatically or attempting to negotiate reduced payment amounts, Alexandra immediately recognized the manipulative nature of Patricia's escalation and began systematic documentation and analysis of the new claims. The contract analysis techniques that Alexandra had developed through her workplace responsibilities enabled her to identify numerous problematic elements in Patricia's revised calculations, including vague service descriptions, arbitrary rate determinations, and retroactive application of charges that violated basic principles of fair dealing and informed consent. Her systematic evaluation revealed that Patricia's expanded charges represented attempts to create new debt obligations without Alexandra's agreement or knowledge of the services supposedly being provided. Alexandra's formal written response to Patricia's financial audit demonstrated her growing expertise in legal communication and dispute resolution processes. Her detailed analysis challenged each category of new charges based on legal precedents regarding family financial relationships, professional service standards, and requirements for legitimate debt creation that Patricia's claims failed to meet. However, Patricia's reaction to Alexandra's systematic challenge of the expanded financial obligations revealed the depth of her commitment to maintaining control over Alexandra's resources and decisions. Rather than withdrawing the questionable charges as she had done with the graduate school counseling invoice, Patricia escalated her demands and began implementing additional pressure tactics designed to force Alexandra's compliance with the revised financial arrangements. Patricia's escalation included threats to disclose Alexandra's alleged ingratitude and financial irresponsibility to extended family members, professional contacts, and community acquaintances who might influence Alexandra's reputation and career prospects. These threats represented attempts to use social pressure and reputation damage as leverage to restore Alexandra's compliance with financial demands that could not withstand objective legal evaluation. The most concerning aspect of Patricia's escalation involved her attempts to interfere with Alexandra's professional relationships and workplace performance by contacting Meridian Marketing Solutions to express concern about Alexandra's emotional stability and decision-making capabilities. Patricia characterized herself as a concerned family member who was worried about Alexandra's recent behavior changes and suggested that workplace stress might be affecting Alexandra's judgment and reliability. Patricia's interference with Alexandra's professional circumstances represented a significant escalation that threatened her economic independence and career advancement opportunities. The attempt to undermine Alexandra's workplace relationships and professional reputation demonstrated Patricia's willingness to cause substantial harm to maintain her control over Alexandra's financial and personal decisions. Alexandra's response to Patricia's workplace interference required careful coordination with Jennifer Torres and senior management at Meridian Marketing Solutions to address the situation professionally while maintaining her credibility and preventing damage to her career prospects. This crisis management challenge tested Alexandra's communication skills and strategic thinking abilities, while providing her with practical experience in managing complex stakeholder relationships under pressure. The conversation that Alexandra had with Jennifer Torres regarding Patricia's contact with Meridian provided an opportunity for Alexandra to disclose the full extent of her family financial manipulation circumstances to a trusted professional mentor who could provide guidance and support. Jennifer's reaction of concern and outrage regarding Patricia's behavior validated Alexandra's assessment of the situation, while providing professional perspective on appropriate responses to family interference with workplace relationships. Jennifer Torres recommended that Alexandra document Patricia's interference with her professional circumstances and consider seeking legal consultation regarding potential harassment and defamation claims that could provide additional legal remedies beyond the family financial dispute issues. This guidance expanded Alexandra's understanding of her legal options, while providing workplace support that contradicted Patricia's characterization of Alexandra as lacking professional competence and reliable judgment. The documentation that Alexandra prepared regarding Patricia's escalation tactics included comprehensive records of the expanded financial demands, workplace interference attempts, and threats of reputation damage that demonstrated a pattern of systematic harassment designed to maintain control over Alexandra's autonomy and financial resources. This evidence would prove essential for subsequent legal proceedings and protective order applications. Alexandra's systematic response to Patricia's escalation required significant emotional resilience and strategic thinking capabilities that tested the personal growth and confidence development she had achieved through her professional advancement and successful boundary-setting experiences. The psychological pressure created by Patricia's coordinated campaign included stress, anxiety, and self-doubt that Alexandra had to manage, while maintaining her workplace performance and legal planning activities. The support that Alexandra received from colleagues at Meridian Marketing Solutions during this challenging period provided essential validation and practical assistance that enabled her to maintain her professional effectiveness while addressing the personal crisis created by Patricia's escalation. The contrast between the supportive professional environment and the hostile family circumstances reinforced Alexandra's recognition that Patricia's behavior represented abnormal manipulation rather than legitimate family relationship expectations. Robert Hayes's response to the escalating conflict between Alexandra and Patricia revealed the extent to which he had abdicated responsibility for protecting Alexandra from financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. His attempts to mediate between their positions focused primarily on maintaining household harmony and preserving his marriage, rather than addressing the fundamental inappropriateness of Patricia's financial demands and harassment tactics. Robert's failure to provide appropriate support during Patricia's escalation campaign forced Alexandra to recognize that she could not rely on family intervention to resolve her circumstances, and that formal legal action might be necessary to establish appropriate boundaries and protect her rights as an autonomous adult. This realization marked a significant psychological transition from hoping for family-based resolution to accepting the necessity of external intervention through legal channels. The crisis created by Patricia's escalation ultimately strengthened Alexandra's resolve and clarified her understanding of the stakes involved in her struggle for independence and appropriate treatment. The systematic harassment and workplace interference demonstrated that Patricia's control systems extended far beyond financial manipulation to encompass comprehensive efforts to prevent Alexandra's transition to autonomous adult functioning and independent decision-making authority. Alexandra's successful navigation of Patricia's escalation campaign while maintaining her professional performance and advancing her legal planning demonstrated the effectiveness of her systematic preparation and personal development efforts. The challenges created by Patricia's harassment tactics tested and validated Alexandra's capabilities while building additional evidence that would support her ultimate legal victory and complete resolution of the exploitative relationship dynamics that had constrained her development for several years. The culmination of Patricia's escalation campaign and Alexandra's systematic documentation of harassment and financial manipulation reached a decisive moment during the first week of September, when Patricia issued an ultimatum that forced Alexandra to choose between complete capitulation to expanded financial demands or formal legal action to protect her rights and establish appropriate boundaries. This ultimatum represented Patricia's final attempt to restore control through intimidation, while simultaneously providing Alexandra with the clarity necessary to commit fully to legal resolution of their dispute. Patricia's ultimatum was delivered during a formally scheduled family meeting that she had arranged with Robert's reluctant participation. The meeting took place in their dining room on a Sunday evening, with Patricia presenting comprehensive documentation that included the expanded financial calculations, payment schedule modifications, and additional service charges that would govern Alexandra's future obligations to the household. The formal presentation format and detailed documentation suggested that Patricia viewed this meeting as the definitive resolution of their financial relationship, rather than the beginning of further negotiation or discussion. The expanded payment schedule that Patricia presented required Alexandra to commit to monthly payments of $950 toward accumulated obligations, while simultaneously increasing her ongoing household contribution to $700 per month. These combined financial obligations would have consumed approximately 70% of Alexandra's post-tax income, leaving insufficient resources for independent living arrangements, professional development activities, or personal expenses that would enable autonomous adult functioning. Patricia's presentation included detailed projections showing that adherence to the revised payment schedule would enable Alexandra to satisfy her accumulated obligations within 8 years, while maintaining appropriate contribution levels to ongoing household expenses. Patricia emphasized that this arrangement represented generous flexibility and reasonable accommodation of Alexandra's financial capacity, while ensuring fair compensation for the investment that she and Robert had made in Alexandra's development and current success. The ultimatum component of Patricia's presentation specified that Alexandra had 72 hours to commit formally to the revised financial arrangements through signed agreement and initial payment implementation. Patricia stated that failure to accept these terms within the specified time frame would result in immediate legal action to recover all accumulated obligations, plus interest, penalties, and legal fees that would substantially increase the total amount owed. Patricia's threat of legal action was accompanied by detailed documentation that she claimed demonstrated the legitimacy of her financial claims and the enforceability of Alexandra's obligations through court proceedings. This documentation included contracts and agreements that Patricia alleged Alexandra had signed during her college years, though Alexandra had no recollection of signing formal debt instruments or agreeing to specific repayment terms for family support expenses. Robert's participation in the family meeting was limited to expressions of concern about the escalating conflict and appeals for compromise that would restore family harmony while addressing Patricia's financial concerns and Alexandra's desire for increased independence. His proposed solutions focused primarily on extended payment timelines and reduced monthly obligations rather than fundamental evaluation of whether Patricia's financial demands represented legitimate family obligations. Alexandra's response to Patricia's ultimatum demonstrated the comprehensive preparation and strategic thinking capabilities that she had developed through months of legal research, professional skill development, and systematic documentation of Patricia's manipulative behavior patterns. Rather than accepting the ultimatum terms or attempting immediate negotiation, Alexandra requested 24 hours to review the proposed arrangements and prepare her formal response. The 24-hour delay that Alexandra requested provided essential time for final consultation with the family law attorney, whose preliminary guidance had supported her earlier legal research and preparation activities. This consultation enabled her to review Patricia's ultimatum documentation and receive professional confirmation that the threatened legal action was unlikely to succeed, given the inappropriate nature of the underlying financial demands and the comprehensive evidence that Alexandra had accumulated regarding Patricia's manipulative behavior. The attorney's evaluation of Patricia's ultimatum confirmed that the alleged signed agreements were insufficient to create enforceable debt obligations for childhood support expenses, and that Patricia's systematic financial manipulation represented violations of Oregon family relationship statutes that could result in sanctions and protective order requirements if the matter proceeded to formal litigation. This legal confirmation provided Alexandra with the confidence necessary to reject Patricia's ultimatum and commit to comprehensive legal resolution of their dispute. Alexandra's decision-making process during the 24-hour period involved careful consideration of the potential consequences associated with formal legal action, including family relationship disruption, financial costs of legal representation, and possible negative impacts on her professional circumstances and personal reputation. However, her analysis concluded that continued compliance with Patricia's escalating demands would prevent her transition to autonomous adult functioning, while subjecting her to indefinite financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. The comprehensive documentation that Alexandra had accumulated through months of systematic record-keeping provided her with confidence that her legal position was strong, and that formal court proceedings would likely result in favorable resolution of the financial dispute, while establishing clear boundaries regarding future family financial relationships. Her evidence included detailed records of Patricia's systematic manipulation, workplace interference, and escalating financial demands that demonstrated patterns of behavior extending far beyond legitimate family financial arrangements. Alexandra's consultation with Jennifer Torres regarding the potential impact of legal action on her professional circumstances provided additional confidence that Meridian Marketing Solutions would continue supporting her career development despite the family conflicts that might arise from formal litigation. Jennifer's assurance that the company valued Alexandra's professional contributions and understood the necessity of addressing family financial manipulation helped eliminate workplace concerns that might have complicated her decision-making process. The strategic considerations that influenced Alexandra's decision included recognition that Patricia's ultimatum represented an escalation that was unlikely to be followed by future moderation or compromise. Patricia's systematic expansion of financial demands and implementation of harassment tactics suggested that voluntary resolution was no longer possible, and that formal legal intervention was necessary to establish appropriate boundaries and protect Alexandra's rights to autonomous adult functioning. Alexandra's psychological preparation for formal legal action included acceptance that family relationships with Patricia would likely be permanently altered regardless of the specific litigation outcomes. Her research into family financial manipulation patterns had revealed that individuals who engage in systematic exploitation rarely accept boundary-setting efforts voluntarily and typically respond to legal challenges with increased hostility and manipulation attempts designed to punish those who resist their control. The financial resources that Alexandra had accumulated through her salary advancement and systematic savings provided her with sufficient funds to retain professional legal representation while maintaining her ability to pursue independent living arrangements if family conflicts made continued household residence untenable. Her improved financial position eliminated the economic leverage that Patricia had previously used to maintain compliance with exploitative financial arrangements. Alexandra's formal response to Patricia's ultimatum was delivered during a second family meeting that took place on the final day of Patricia's specified deadline. Her response included comprehensive rejection of all expanded financial demands, formal notice that she would not make further payments toward accumulated obligations that she considered inappropriate and unenforceable, and clear statement of her intention to seek legal resolution if Patricia proceeded with threatened litigation. The documentation that Alexandra presented during her response included detailed analysis of Patricia's financial claims based on legal research and professional consultation, comprehensive records of Patricia's manipulative behavior and harassment tactics, and formal demand that Patricia cease interference with Alexandra's professional circumstances and personal relationships. Her presentation was professionally formatted and legally sound, demonstrating her thorough preparation and commitment to achieving resolution through appropriate legal channels. Patricia's reaction to Alexandra's rejection of the ultimatum terms included expressions of shock and disappointment regarding what she characterized as Alexandra's ingratitude and abandonment of family obligations and responsibilities. Patricia immediately implemented her threatened legal action by scheduling consultation with an attorney who specialized in debt collection and family financial disputes, demonstrating her commitment to pursuing enforcement of her financial claims through formal court proceedings. Robert's response to the breakdown of family negotiations included appeals for reconsideration and compromise that might restore household harmony while addressing both parties' concerns and financial interests. However, his continued focus on conflict avoidance, rather than substantive evaluation of the appropriateness of Patricia's demands, reinforced Alexandra's recognition that family-based resolution was not possible, and that external legal intervention was necessary. The commitment to formal legal action that resulted from Patricia's ultimatum and Alexandra's principled rejection represented the culmination of months of systematic preparation and personal development that had transformed Alexandra from a compliant victim of financial manipulation into a confident advocate capable of challenging exploitation through appropriate legal channels. Her decision to pursue litigation demonstrated courage, strategic thinking, and commitment to establishing appropriate boundaries that would enable autonomous adult functioning and respectful family relationships based on mutual consideration rather than systematic exploitation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.